They say a mother's love is endless, but sometimes it shows not in words, not in gifts, not even in hugs, but in hunger. This is the story of a mother who chose to sleep hungry, so her children would never know what hunger feels like. It was a freezing winter night in a small English town. The wind outside roared against the windows, and the air inside the house felt heavy with silence. In a dimly lit room, 3 plates sat on a wooden table. 2 had small portions of mashed potatoes and bread. The 3rd plate was empty. "Mum, where's your food?" asked little Emily, her voice soft and full of concern. Mary smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I already ate, sweetheart. You 2 finish before it gets cold." But that was a lie. She hadn't eaten for 2 days. She watched her children, Emily and Jake, eat slowly, enjoying every bite as if it were a feast. To Mary, the sound of their chewing was like music. It meant they were still healthy, still alive, still hers. When they finished, she tucked them into bed, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, "Good night, my loves." Then she sat alone in the dark, her stomach aching, her eyes glistening with quiet tears. Mary Dawson had not always lived like this. There was a time when life was kind. Her husband Thomas worked in a small factory, and though they didn't have much, their home was filled with laughter and warmth. Every Sunday, Thomas would bake bread, and the smell would fill the house with happiness. Emily would dance in the kitchen while Jake played with his toy cars, and Mary would watch them, believing life would always be this way. But life has its storms. One winter, Thomas lost his job when the factory closed. He searched for work everywhere but came home empty-handed each night. Then came the fever, pneumonia. Hospitals were expensive, and by the time help came, it was too late. Mary buried her husband on a grey morning when the sky itself seemed to cry with her. After that, everything changed. She sold their small home to pay the debts and moved into a worn-down cottage on the edge of town. It had a leaking roof and creaking doors, but it was all she could afford. From that day forward, she became both a mother and a father to her children. Mary worked wherever she could, cleaning houses, washing dishes, mending clothes. Her hands cracked from cold water and soap. Her back ached from bending all day, but she never complained. She only smiled when she came home and said, "Mommy's got dinner tonight." Sometimes dinner was nothing but a piece of bread and water, but she always found a way to make it sound special. "Is this soup new, Mom?" Jake once asked, tasting the thin broth she had made from flour and salt. "Yes," she said, smiling softly. "It's my secret recipe." He grinned proudly, believing it was true. She turned away quickly so he wouldn't see the tears that slipped down her cheek. One afternoon, after hours of scrubbing floors, Mary came home with only 1 loaf of bread. Her stomach growled loudly, but she ignored it. She cut the bread into 3 pieces, giving the largest ones to her children. Emily noticed that her mother's plate was empty again. "Mum, please take some," she said, holding out her share. Mary shook her head and smiled gently. "No, darling, I ate earlier at work." Another lie, another night of hunger. That evening when the children slept, she sat by the window staring at the moon. It was full and bright, glowing over the rooftops. "Thomas," she whispered into the silence, "I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." Her tears fell freely, her body weak, but her spirit refused to break. She prayed softly that her children would never have to make the same sacrifices she did. The next morning, Mary went to the cafe where she worked part-time. The owner, Mrs. Hill, noticed how pale and tired she looked. "Mary, are you all right?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am, just didn't sleep well," Mary replied with a faint smile. But when Mrs. Hill turned away, Mary felt dizzy. The world spun, and she fell to the floor. They rushed her to a local clinic, where the doctor said she was severely undernourished. "She hasn't eaten properly in weeks," he told Mrs. Hill in disbelief. "Her body's running on nothing but love." When Mary woke up, she saw Mrs. Hill sitting beside her bed, with tears in her eyes. "Mary, why didn't you tell anyone?" Mary looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want my children to worry. They think I'm strong. I wanted them to believe that, just for a little longer." Mrs. Hill placed her hand on Mary's. "You're not just strong, my dear. You're extraordinary." From that day on, Mrs. Hill secretly packed extra food for Mary to take home every evening. "Tell them the cafe threw it away," she said kindly, so Mary's pride wouldn't hurt. When Mary returned home that night, she laid out a real meal for the first time in months. Bread, soup, and even a bit of chicken. Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Mum, where did all this come from?" Mary smiled and said, "Maybe the angels heard our prayers." They laughed and ate together, and for once, Mary's plate wasn't empty. Years passed. Emily and Jake grew up, studied hard, and got good jobs. They often looked back at their childhood and wondered how their mother had kept them alive when they had so little. Mary never told them the truth. How many nights she slept hungry, pretending she was full. How many mornings she went to work with an empty stomach but a full heart. One evening, when Mary was old and frail, Emily sat beside her and asked, "Mum, when we were little, did you ever go hungry?" Mary smiled, her eyes gentle and tired. "Maybe sometimes," she said softly, "but I was never truly hungry because I had you." She reached out and held her daughter's hand. "You were my food, my strength, my reason." That night, Mary closed her eyes and drifted to sleep with a peaceful smile. And though her stomach was finally full, it was her heart that had been full all along. Full of love that never ran out, even when everything else did. Because that's what mothers do. They give, they sacrifice, and sometimes they sleep hungry so their children never have to.